What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guy Cody here, joining me, friend of the show. It's been a while, Mr. Kevin Bowen himself. Kevin, how you doing, man?
Cody, doing great, man. Happy early birthday to you.
Appreciate that.
Not gonna act like I knew that before we chatted, but a happy early birthday to you, and a little happy Mother's Day, I guess, everybody out there as well.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, man, what a crazy weekend we just came out of here. And NFL draft, the Indianapolis Colts added 8 new players to their roster, including some other guys in the undrafted free agent market. And I know, Kevin, you did an article here recently about a similar topic. All right, who are some players now based off of the draft who are positively and negatively impacted by this draft? So I thought we could start positively and we can move our way to the negatives. Who are some guys right off the bat that stand out to you from this draft? The Colts obviously had, 4 picks within the first 3 rounds, primarily focused on offense for the first 3 picks, then traded back up in the draft, got a safety in Nick Cross, and then addressed some other positions on day 3. But who are some guys immediately that come to mind for you that you would say were positively impacted by this draft?
Yeah, I think you start with probably 2 guys that I put on the opposite side of this list after free agency, and that would be Matt Ryan and Jonathan Taylor. Just the fact that you've added more in the passing game, specifically with Taylor and certainly Ryan as well. You added an offensive lineman that I think at the worst is your 6th offensive lineman. Could be a starter. Improves your depth, run blocking, pass blocking, and those sorts of things. Obviously, Jelani Woods and Alec Pierce are going to help you out in the passing game to some degree. We'll see how much, but important pieces there for Ryan, and maybe take a little pressure. You think about Pierce and his big playability, especially early in the season. If he can strike a few times outside the numbers, does that move a safety a little bit over, to those numbers? Does that open up something, either down the middle of the field in the pass game or for JT, taking a safety out of the box, something like that. So those are 2 guys I'd put atop the list. I think you could throw Isaiah Rodgers and Brandon Faison in there cornerback wise. For those that watch the With the Next Pick series, you will have caught that, Chris Ballard mentioned corner as one of those needs, even at 42. And just with how everything fell, they obviously didn't address corner until round 7. And who knows if Rodney Thomas is even a corner. He's got some position flex. So I would say those 2 guys in their hopes to, fill out the nickel package. One of the 2 was Stephon Gilmore and Kenny Moore. I'd put them as well. I didn't have this in my story, but Kenny or Ben Banigou is probably one to throw in there just because they didn't take any edge rusher. Similar to corner, I don't think there's a lot of edge coming in the undrafted free agent class either. I don't know. Banigou's so low on the roster for me, it's hard to really call him a true winner, but he is probably someone that you could throw on that list as well. So yeah, those are maybe I'm forgetting somebody, but I would say those are the ones that really kind of stood out to me.
I think one you also mentioned was Rodrigo Blankenship, because the
Oh
Colts
yeah,
did not add a kicker at all, which must signal that they are very confident in his abilities coming off that injury. So, yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with you there. Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor. I could maybe, make the argument for like a Michael Pittman, that being that true number 1 guy. He's has a lot of focus, obviously, this season on him. Getting a guy like Alec Pierce, could that potentially take some, some of that double coverage off of him and stuff? Obviously, if Pierce is how productive is he? That's a debate for another time. But yeah, I think definitely, certainly Matt Ryan, I think, is the biggest winner because now you got him some protection, got him some weapons. Those are the big things. Then I know you and I were both like, Colts, what are you doing, man? Like, you have not addressed. You've had your tight end retire. You let Zach Pascal walk. Like, what are you doing? You're not addressing it. You're not helping Matt Ryan out. Why are you bringing him in if you're not going to give him some weapons? So, yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Hot Rod. I'm glad you brought that up as well because it's weird. You're sitting there Saturday, and I'm not gonna lie, I got to the complex kind of early in the 4th round. I'm thinking, oh, this would be a good time to write some stories and just kind of do a little bit more research and intel into those day 2 picks. And all of a sudden, these kickers start coming off the board. I'm like, what in the world? Like that just catches your attention. I'm like, usually, really only when quarterbacks come off the board do you pay a lot of attention to it. And all of a sudden, you see all these kickers and the fact that again, no kicker in the draft, and then so far in the undrafted class, it doesn't look like a whole lot, if anything. There, we'll see if there's a mini camp tryout that leads to something. Yeah, I would certainly put Hot Rod on that list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with winners, there's also going to be some losers, and I feel like there's a decent amount of guys because the Colts did have a lot of those picks in that second and third round that could make immediate impacts. Who are some guys that immediately come to mind for you, Kevin, that you think are probably going to be negatively impacted, or certainly going to have their seat be a little bit warm on this roster?
Yeah. Again, not necessarily seat warm right now or anything like that. I mean, he's going to start for you week one, but I think Kari Willis is atop the list. Um, you know, yes, Gus Bradley, I think, is open minded to playing more defensive backs, more safeties, especially this season. But, when you think about where you spent the draft pick at safety, there comes a point in time and just how much money can you invest in that position? Um, you know, I thought Bobby Okereke could kind of be in this situation entering the draft. Well, now I feel like Kari Willis has kind of taken what I thought Okereke could be in that sort of position as you're in a contract year. The difference being Kari's battled a few more injuries. And it's not because the staff doesn't like him. The staff really likes him. But we got to remember it's a new defensive coordinator as well. And Gus Bradley's voice has been heard clearly with some roster moves this offseason. And you do wonder if this is another one where, maybe to Gus Bradley, Kari Willis isn't at that level that, Eberflus viewed him or something along those lines. So certainly he's going to help you out this year. Julian Blackman come back from the Achilles and all of that. So this isn't necessarily a 2022 quote unquote loser, but I think when you look forward to that second contract, I get it. Nick Cross can play on a rookie deal for a while, but at some point, a Nelson extension, a Pittman extension, a Taylor extension, you just can't give multi-year deals to all the guys that you want to. And I could see Kari getting that somewhere else. Hell, I could see him getting it in Chicago. He strikes me as kind of a Bears type safety. So I'd put him there. Blackman to a degree. It's one of those things where you just don't want one more injury. I mean, if you get one more serious injury, you can't ignore it for how good of a player he is. So I thought those two were the two that pretty clearly stood out to me. A guy that I expected to be on the loser list, it was Matt Pryor entering the draft. You felt like they were finally going to draft the tackle somewhat early. Now, when they didn't draft one in round two, and then they took Jelani Woods right there at the start of, or I guess at their first pick in three, for a few picks there, Bernard Ryman is still on the board. But if you're in the Matt Pryor camp, you're thinking, oh boy, did we dodge it? Now they take Ryman, and we'll see. I think him and Pryor will be that competition at left tackle. Does Pryor factor in at right guard at all? I think that's Danny Pinter's job, but Pryor does have some experience there. But still, I would label him in there now. It's more of a competition than it maybe was this time last week. And I don't the other name, Cody, I feel like it's been mentioned a good amount, and I guess curious your thoughts on it as well. I'm not as much in the Kylan Granson is squarely in that loser category as a lot of other people because I just think Granson's a different body type than really the other three guys in the room. I mean, he is a split out Trey Burton type of chess piece, which is not what Mo Alley Cox or Jelani Woods or Drew Ogletree, assuming Ogletree makes an early impact, which remains to be seen. There's a pretty steep jump in competition for him. So I don't view Granson as much in that light. I get it. There are probably some things that he needs to tighten up, certainly, but I put him on the list just because they did draft two tight ends, and it's the first time they've done that in a decade. But still, I don't put him as maybe high up on the list as the others.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you because what other tight end on this roster does what he can do, right? Like,
Right.
no other tight end can offer you that. Obviously we don't know with Jelani Woods, but he's still pretty raw at this point. He's got some things you like, but yeah, I mean, there's not like a true like receiver tight end outside of Granson. I think right now, I think you're absolutely right, and I think you need all those skill sets, right? I mean, we saw. I know obviously this is maybe comparing apples to oranges a little bit, but like with Eric Ebron, right? Like you saw you needed that kind of tight end, that vertical threat down the field to allow you to do what you were able to do. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to have 15 touchdowns or anything crazy like that, but like you need those different guys with different skill sets. And so, yeah, I think that, maybe it does cut into his playing time a little bit, but I don't think that necessarily means that he's a loser because I think they certainly want to see Jelani Woods get a lot of playing time or a decent amount for his rookie year because took him pretty high. So yeah, I think I definitely agree with you there. I was trying to think of any other positions that potentially could be viewed as a loser, and I really can't think of any right now, Kevin. But I think the good thing was the Colts added some competition, right, at some key positions, right? They added competition wide receiver, added it at obviously left tackle. They added it at safety, which I think is very interesting as well. Like that was a pick. I was shocked that they traded back up. Like I thought they were done, man. And it's funny because Derek actually was streaming it, and he actually ended the stream before the Colts traded back up, and he's like, "Oh man, what in the heck?" So they must love Nick Cross or something, man.
You know, it's funny you say that. I certainly, excuse me, thought the same thing. And yes, actions speak louder than words. They love him. I mean, clearly, the fact that you're willing to do that. We had Stephen Holder on our morning show Wednesday morning, and it kind of popped in my head. You sit down and whatever, have a beer with Chris Ballard, and you just ask him, all right, which pick do you love the most? Not, who do you think will be the best player, but who do you love the most? My first thought was Cross, but again, I think back to it more, and if you watch the next pick, the final episode, it might be Jelani Woods. And certainly Frank Reich, it had a little bit of a Taylor Pittman feel to it of like, can we get both?
Yeah.
That sort of aspect to it. And again, the fact that Woods is such a unique athlete and plays a position that, I feel like that position can have just a lot of the same, a lot of interchangeability. But if you can find a guy that really separates himself from the other tight ends, you can slot that as one of the more important positions, on your team or in the league. I think we put kind of quarterback, wideout, edge, left tackles, corner, kind of in that, tier one. But if you've got a Kittle or you've got a Waller or you got a Kelsey, that can all of a sudden, kind of slot you up into that tier one. So Woods got a long way to go, certainly. But I feel like if you ask them the picks they love the most, it probably goes Woods and then Cross would be my guess.
I never thought the Colts would find another tight end bigger than Mo Alley Cox, but here we are. It's wild, man. That draft, talk about athleticism, man. That RAS score for Jelani Woods, 10 out of 10. I've never seen anything like it. That's crazy to me. Like you can find a player that's a 10 out of 10. Like that's unheard of. Like that's just absolutely bizarre. So, but I was wondering also, kind of talking about wide receiver with Alec Pierce. Are there any of these wide receivers? Because we all know Ballard's been on the record, right? He said we like our guys. Frank Reich has said we like our guys. These guys have said that. They've backed their guys, which a lot of people read into that and got really upset with Frank Reich and Chris Ballard about that. But like you said, actions speak louder than words. And the Colts, with their first pick, they knew they had a need at wide receiver. So are there any of these wide receivers that, if you didn't address it, might have got more of a chance to make an impact on this roster or certainly vie for more playing time that you think now maybe are quote unquote losers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of me says you could slot just about any of them in the winner category, but I really think you could probably put the slot guys more into that category than the big guys.
Mm-hmm.
So the names I think of immediately are kind of Campbell and Kiki Kuti. Ashton Doolin, I think, has got a little bit of flexibility there, whereas Patman and Strawn, I get it. It's enticing to throw all the big guys out on the field at once, but you do want guys that kind of excel in the middle of the field with those routes versus just having a bunch of basketball players out there. So if I had to specifically kind of nail down a couple there in the wideout room, I would say Campbell and Kuti. DeMichael Harris, I believe, is still on the roster as well. He'd be someone that'd slot in there. So when the debate, at 42, certainly at 53, and I think he just won a few picks after Pierce. But when you saw where Sky Moore came off the board, I think that is where you saw the whole, big versus slot. So I would say those couple names.
Yeah, for sure. I did have a question. Stay with the wide receivers, and I want to get your opinion on this. I don't know if I've heard it yet. Do you potentially think the Colts should add a vet wide receiver in there because it's young? It's a very young group right now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to bringing T.Y. Hilton back. And I don't look at it from a Hollywood script feel to it. I look at it from they've basically told us that Carson Wentz's play influenced a lot of the lack of wide receiver production last season. Well, doesn't Hilton fall into that group as well? Um, his injuries last year were not Julio Jones nagging hamstring that you really worry about, lower body. It was a neck injury, so that shouldn't affect necessarily his speed or his quickness or things like that. By no means am I acting like Hilton can come in here and definitely be a 1A or whatever he thinks money deserved wise, compared to how much he made last year. I'm not saying that, but I just think there's so much youth in that room. There's a guy that gets it. There's a guy that I think commands, um, some ears. He's not a big talker, but when he does talk, I think a lot of people listen. And I think that's not something you always see at the wide receiver position as well. So, yeah, I would look into bringing him back. I mean, the other names, Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, and it's a little bit an older group. I feel like besides them, from Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley and all of that. Um, I, I do. I don't necessarily agree with the people that are like, no, you can't go out and sign a veteran wideout. You don't want to stunt the growth of these young guys. Well, I mean, these young guys, a lot of them are day 3 picks or even undrafted free agents. It's not like you've got
Right.
young guys that are, so many people I think compared to the defensive line last year. Torrey was a second round pick. Banigou was a second round pick. Pay was a first rounder. Tyquan Lewis a second rounder, and we saw how that worked out. And those are the
Right.
those are the high draft picks. So um, I get it. Everyone just wants to blame Wentz for everything, but at some level, I feel like you just need another veteran voice, not only wideout wise, but your tight end room is extremely young as well.
Mhm.
So I think that would help when you kind of group all the pass catchers or even just all the skill players together.
Yeah, it's an extremely young group. Mo Ali Cox is the vet, which is absolutely nuts because he's
Yeah,
not
it's a
he's
great
not old
point.
himself. So
Yeah.
absolutely bizarre. But all right, Kevin. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's always fun to have you on. We'll have to have you on sooner rather than later because I know it's been a while. But man, I hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your weekend. And I know you said you're in a wedding this weekend or you're going to a wedding. So I hope that's great for you, man. And thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate all your support. As always, guys, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out Kevin's work over there. Kevin, where can they find you and your work and social media and all that good stuff?
Yeah, K Bowen 1070 on social, and then 1075thefan.com. Do a morning show as well every morning from 7 to 10 a.m. So, yeah, check out my Twitter. You'll see some links in there. But happy birthday, man. And
Appreciate it.
everybody, have a great weekend.
Yep. All right, guys, take care. And as always, go Colts.